Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another seamless conversation. Today, I'm joined by Janne Kyttanen, someone who's been breaking rules and pushing boundaries in design, tech, and manufacturing for the better half of 3 decades. From pioneering 3D printing to reimagining how we make food and footwear, Jan has never been afraid of what others might call moonshots. These days, as founder and CPO of What the Future, he's trying to completely reinvent how we make things more local, more efficient, more sustainable, without losing the creativity that makes it all very exciting. So with that, Yana, so good to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you and I actually met last December at the Footwearize event. So a shout out to Anika Vanenta as well for making that a reality.
Yeah.
But look, Yana, let's start with you. You know, you've been called a pioneer in 3D printing, and you've dabbled everywhere from food to footwear. Let's strip it back. Let's start with who are you? How did this whole journey start, and what's been driving you for the last 3 decades?
That's might be a long story, so I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. So let's say like 30 years ago, I was a design student, and we had to make a graduation project, right? So it was a product design study, and I was tasked to make a design. And I was more curious about how things were made globally, So I kind of started dabbling into supply chains and so forth, So kind of dabbling outside of the realm of making just pretty things and designing a couch and a sofa and a lamp and so forth. So I was more curious about, how do we make if we were to rewire the entire planet in an efficient and a sustainable way, how would we make things locally instead of making these massive chunks of products in China or Far East? And let's say I'm going to make a certain product, you never know how many you're going to sell. So you have to make a gazillion pieces, and then at the end of the day, those things which are not sold will end up in the ocean. So I was more challenging the weight of how do we make things, and that's kind of when I started dabbling into 3D printing and augmented reality and different ways of how to make this kind of a digital production locally possible. So that was the foundation for me to get really curious about 3D printing. I'm like, hey, this might be the answer on how to make things locally and only make what we need. And that's kind of this was a foundation. That's where it all started. So I was more curiosity about manufacturing and the nature rather than making pretty designs.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And for people who haven't come across what the future yet, how would you describe it simply? Like if you were at a dinner party, how would you describe what the future does? And also, as part of that, why focus on food and footwear, which in my mind are two completely different spaces, but perhaps they are more similar than I think.
Yeah, and again, because I look at it from a different perspective, So there's more than meets the eye, So when we started the ice cream vertical from our technology business, of course, once you make an ice cream product, people will ask me, over the years, like, well, so how is the ice cream business doing? And I'm like, no, we're not actually in the ice cream business, and that makes it kind of complicated for people to understand. Like, yeah, but you're selling ice cream, like, yes, but we're actually making a high velocity local manufacturing production technique that can be deployed in anywhere in the world, in any kind of liquid, paste, or gel ingredient, and we can make one or a billion. The production line is the same. So funny enough, I'm literally on the same journey I started 30 years ago, but of course you learn a lot over the years, So when you're in your 20s and you look at 3D printing and like, hey, this is going to save the planet and all of that. And to a certain extent, things have exceeded in that area, and the technology had its merits and its place and all that. But I got frustrated about the scale and the speed and the costs and other things that just didn't work, So I saw an opportunity of creating a hybrid technology instead. It's just not going to be a linear technology that is going to give me the answers. We have to think of something completely different. And now, if you look at food and footwear, that's kind of also how my brain works, So I'm pretty good in connecting the hybrid dots of different things instead of looking at a linear path and just trying to make a 3D printer work faster. Because there is a limit, like how fast you can stack little layers on top of each other. There's a fundamental limit to it, and limited materials, limited costs, all these different things. So I hit a ceiling. I'm like, okay, it's just not. It will have its place in certain applications, certain industries, but I'm interested in impact. And by impact, I mean two things: there's sustainability and there's economics. So these can work in silos, so they have to come together. So you have to be able to make sustainable products for the environment and sustainable for the business. Then we have an opportunity to make it work and create an impact.
Amazing. And for anyone who hasn't seen, I would very much recommend that you follow Janne on LinkedIn and What the Future as well. Because on the food side, I've seen the amazing Shrek ice creams and all these different characters that are being made all around the world. They're so much fun. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the facility that you're currently building in Amsterdam. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to come and visit before I left. But you're building, as far as I'm aware, a three-story shoe plant right in the heart of Amsterdam, which I imagine must be one of the most expensive places in the world to do it. What's the thinking behind that? What's the goal, and I guess what's been the biggest obstacle so far in getting that set up?
Um, so what we realized also, like dabbling into these different industries, so nobody wants to take any risks. So if you're gonna show somebody a PowerPoint, here's a machine, here's a factory, here's this and that, great economics, what have you, nobody will believe you until you make it yourself. So we have now done that in ice cream. We have built several factories around the world. So only after you do the big investments yourself, then all of a sudden, hey, well, it's working, and now we want to join you. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So we are taking all the risk because we have a lot of belief in our technology. But in order to make something like that work on a local scale, in one of the most expensive real estate and labor markets in the world, whether it's London, Paris, Amsterdam, that's kind of really similar pricing. Um, you have to rethink how things are made. So we have, in terms of food, so now we're busy with two sectors in ice cream and then chocolate. So we're reimagining how that manufacturing happens. So once you completely peel the onion to its core, you start realizing, well, this is inefficient. We don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need that, and we don't need the other. So same thing in footwear. In order for you to be able to make these things in a commercially viable way in a very expensive place, you have to rethink how you make a shoe. So our shoes are incredibly simple, and there's only two parts, and we directly um, injecting the shoes. There's an upper and there's a bottom part, and they come from the end of the line as a ready shoe. So there's no human hands dabbling into the manufacturing and trying to put 100 different parts together. No, none of that. So we're not here to replicate what China makes. We're trying to simplify what everybody makes.
Nice. And is the idea that you will just make your own shoes in the facility, or is there also a plan to kind of become a like an on-demand production partner for other brands too, if they obviously adopt the same kind of design thinking?
Now, I mean, just to be clear, this is a manufacturing technology that should be open for everybody. And we welcome all the brands, big or small. And also, just to be clear, the facility in Amsterdam, it is not our goal to be a factory making millions of pairs in Amsterdam. No, it's more of a pilot factory. And we will have, let's say, a capacity maybe for 100,000 pairs right in the center of Amsterdam. But it's a licensing model. So we want to prove the point, and also we realize, like, when you build a factory, if you want to make an efficient factory, and gladly we started in the food sector because the margins are so small. Even if you have your door opening in the wrong direction, that 5 seconds that somebody goes through a door, it's inefficiency. So we have to take everything out of it. So in order for us to know how to make shoes at scale, if we don't build a factory by ourselves, we can't deploy the factory anywhere else. So we're making a mini factory here and also de-risking the entire, let's say, licensing adventure for our partners. So once they see the machine working and there's thousands of products being made from the machine, it's easier for them to understand, like, okay, now we can deploy this into any country you like.
Nice. And I think Amsterdam, having lived there for two years, I think it's an amazing place to do it. I know that there's a lot of brands and companies there that are trying to kind of push the envelope when it comes to innovate innovation and doing things differently. So yeah, I think if anyone is in Amsterdam at any point, please reach out to Janne. And when I'm there next, I would love to come and see the facility too and see what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Anybody is welcome. We give tours every day. It's a quite an amazing building. It's one of the last monuments in Amsterdam to be rebuilt. So the entire building is it's about 30,000 square meters and two levels. Of course, the factory is not the entire building, but it's quite something. It's a bit of a crazy project. It's been going on now for about 10 years in the building, so a lot to do.
Amazing. And do you have a date yet in mind when you hope to go live or
Yeah, so our factory is going to be we're going to be operational towards the end of September. So just a few weeks, and we're going to be up and running.
incredible?
I mean, we've been up and running all this time, but basically, you can imagine we've been making a mini factory on a construction site for the last 3 years. So we've been making a factory, and then we have to move within the construction site to another place. We've learned quite a bit of how to deploy factories really quickly. So your plumbing and your electricity and your gases and your hoses and whatnot. So even if you move the factory by 1 meter, well, it's the same as moving it 100 meters. So, but now there's going to be a dedicated place, so it's quite exciting.
Incredible. I can't wait to see it. One of the other things that I want to talk about is that and again, people should follow you on LinkedIn because you're never afraid to call out the BS and the big statements that brands or the industry are making. I saw a recent post in which you said something along the lines of sustainability is dead. What's going to be the next kind of trendy gimmick? And I tend to agree with that. We work with a lot of brands. They always say that sustainability is big on their priority list. The reality is, in practice, it's not. Um, can you elaborate a
Yeah, if
little?
I could just kind of go to that for 1 second, and it's um, it was also the post was about kind of stirring the conversation, and then I got like comments from certain parties. Again, I just want to be flat out, just open about these comments. Like when you start commenting about the big S&P 500 companies, let's say Coca-Cola, and somebody says, well, they're really sustainable because they've got solar panels and their EV trucks transporting their poisonous sugar drinks. And I'm like, no, I don't see that as sustainable. That's more, it's creating efficiency to make more profit and making more products. But still, the company remains the biggest plastic polluter on the planet. So it's not, it just doesn't work for me, and I want to be honest about it. Just
Yeah,
doesn't.
100%. What do you think brands need to be doing more of right now in order to actually be meaningfully uh, sustainable and make kind of like a positive step to change?
Oh man, that's a pretty big question because you got brands who
Yeah.
make one shoe and you have brands who make hundreds of millions of shoes. So it's really difficult. It's far more difficult for the big ones to move, and it's more easy for the small ones to be nimble, but they don't have the scale. Um, so for me, again, like really the core, I want to just reiterate this again. So the goal that we have is literally compete with the costs of Asia by making fully bio-inert shoes. And it requires for you to rethink the entire supply chain, the entire planet. How are these things made? Why are they made in a certain way? Why are they made there? And what kind of technology would be able to solve these problems? So I would say um, what is the best way for brands to be sustainable? Well, looking the most sustainable way of making things and most cost effective. So give me a call. Happy to make you.
Amazing. Um, I want to talk about local production a little bit more generally. Obviously, there's a huge push, especially over in the States at the moment with tariffs and everything that's going on there, to try and locally produce more. What have you found to be the biggest myth that brands believe about a local production?
What is the biggest myth? Um, I think that again, like kind of boils down to creativity. A lot of the big brands have been trying to bring the China shoe, how they make it, and now let's bring it to the Western world, and just with robots and try to automate and all that, So that's one of the myths why I just don't see that working. It hasn't worked so far unless you get the automation really to a level of, and also the supply chain, because you can automate whatever you want, but if you don't have the material companies next to you, then that all, again doesn't work, So it's more, I think the myth is about trying to replicate Asian way of making things in Europe. I haven't seen that working. So you have to rethink how to make shoes in the Western world. Your market is going to be then the product might look a bit different, but you need to design it for the local market by using local technologies and local materials.
100%. Um, I want to ask, I mean, this is obviously like a very hypothetical thing to ask. If you could restart the footwear industry from scratch and the way that all of these, particularly the legacy brands, make things, what would that new system look like in your ideal scenario?
It would look exactly like the machine we're making.
I like it. I like it.
But again, like
It-
let's not confuse the audience, So there's the legacy way of making things, and I don't think that's going to go anywhere. That's perfectly fine. These products are in the shelf and people use them, and there's billions of shoes being made. But we are just creating a different kind of market. We're creating a different kind of product, and it's a different kind of experience. And there's maybe a different kind of sales channel. There's just different things, And I want to kind of bring our ice cream project as an example here. So if you look at these creations that we have made, there's just a really small portion of these products. But if you just focus on one of the kind of simple ways to explain it, if you look at the Shrek here, for example. So I also wrote a LinkedIn post about that as well. There's only one kiosk in the world that sells this particular product, but we reimagined the sales channels. Normally ice cream products are sold in retail. That's your most of the sales going through from that channel, and there is no channel for creating an experience and selling it directly from a factory to a small kiosk. That just didn't exist before, So we reimagined not just the production technique, but also the sales channels and the margin structures and the entire experience, So but what you might not know is that that particular popsicle is sold in a Universal Studios park in Orlando, and they have 10 million visitors. So just a small kiosk. So that particular product is embedded into the experience of that one ride. But then we can multiply that to every aquarium, every zoo, every what have you. So it's an entirely different way of looking at things.
Amazing. And do they actually have the technology themselves in the kiosk to make it, or are you making it
No, no,
somewhere
no.
else?
So we have a factory in Miami, so we ship these products from Miami to Orlando, and that's it. But we are working with other parks now, and where we might be making ice cream on the spot, so inside the park themselves.
That would be very cool. I think, again, as you say, from a consumer e e experience standpoint, as well. But yeah, I love the Shrek one. It always stands out. I always see that post because it's such a
Yes.
striking image.
It's a,
And
it's a very simple, of course we can make these things for any birthday party or marketing launch or whatever, but it's like these are still a marketing launch of a product is a one-off adventure, but this is a repeat sale for high value, high profit for everybody, and the consumers love it, and it's a repeat business. So it's a really good example to showcase our technology.
absolutely. So you've built chemistry software, the plants from scratch. You also, before we started the interview, you were saying that you had the cap of the raiser as well, and all of these different things. From your experience and perspective, what's one technical challenge that people perhaps underestimate when it comes to decentralized production?
Um, Scale. So
Scale.
it's easy to make one and a 10 and 100, but once you start going into the thousands and the tens of thousands, so it's kind of like, okay, this is a different story. I can make a 3D printed shoe and I can put it online and make 10, make a limited edition, or what I want. But once you really need to repeat, 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 it's not just from a technical perspective, but also from a culture perspective. Let's say normally have an engineer running a 3D printer, but now give this engineer a consumer hat at the same time. And like, is it what is the quality level that the consumer needs to kind of experience this product when they open the box and the wrapping,
Yeah.
the whole thing, you know? So it's not a kind of coming from that one-off local to making millions of the same. That's an entirely different different ball game.
Yeah, 100%. I'd also love your opinion. I won't mention any names, but you'll know who I'm talking about. There's obviously big people making waves at the moment in the news with 3D printing, and they're partnering, with big brands in the space. Do you think that these are one-off gimmicks in that case, or do you hope that those brands really are thinking about a new way of making, but also of engaging with their consumer base?
No, no, absolutely, and I fully support them. I think it's great and something that, of course, I tried many, many years ago and I didn't succeed with it. And I'm like, nah. But again, like it's always a timing and what's the team and the pricing and how the world evolves and whatever, you know. So we're making these things, of course, decades ago, but the technology was far too expensive. I'm like, this is just not going to work, you know. And then, of course, here come the other guys, like, we're actually making it work, which is like amazing, great, So for sure, there's a market niche for these things. Limited editions, smaller batches, and then every week you might have a new launch with a brand and what have you. So collectibles and whatnot. So absolutely, I don't think those shoes are going to go anywhere away. That whole thing will carve itself into a nice, interesting niche. But of course, what I mean by niche is you're limited by the materials, and you will kind of keep on creating a particular kind of shoe with a particular type of performance. So you're not all of a sudden going to start 3D printing cotton or tencel or wool or what have you. So and what is also really kind of refreshing for me to see is that if you look at this particular large brand, for example, that they've been very performance driven through their entire life cycle, and then all of a sudden you're able to take these uh, uh, products that don't have, let's say, for example, the kind of ground contact quality that you used to be making for decades. So kind of breaking their internal barriers on those performance levels that are required for specific brands. That's really refreshing. So I'm really happy that they're kind of like opening up their minds and all that, because we have similar challenges. We have natural materials that we're working with, and they just do not. I'm not saying that they don't perform as well as synthetic materials, but they perform differently. So these material testing ASTM tests have been created for synthetic materials, and we have a different kind of material that performs differently. So it just, you have to create different kinds of parameters and different test procedures and so forth. So same thing with 3D printed footwear as well. They will have a different kind of performance and feel and look and all that. So I'm happy. I mean, again, like there's like two major big brands have been kind of looking into this 3D space, and they're both uh, uh, going out there with lower performance ground contact products. I'm like, great, good for you.
Yeah, amazing to hear. You've been quite vocal as well on LinkedIn about AI. So I just want to quickly take a moment to ask you, as it relates to what you're doing, your model, your technology, your facility, does AI play a role in any of that? Are you seeing it more as hype at the moment, or do you think it genuinely has like an opportunity to change the game for the
Oh,
better?
absolutely. I mean, AI. I mean, it's like we have a number of AI projects that are going on, and but the difference is here. I mean, when the whole kind of hype, yes, it is a hype like anything else. So there's billions are poured into it, and but they're all based on these big companies. Let's say fundamental code, whether it's OpenAI or Google or Meta or so forth. So whoever is kind of building something on top of that, it's like you might go out there with a company and raise a lot of money, and a month later there's another tool that is going to just go like 10 times better than what you got. You're just kind of out of the business. So these are the kind of things that will keep on happening. A lot of companies will come in the market, raise a lot of money, and they will disappear next month. Because again, these are for me based on really short-term thinking and kind of gimmicks, right? And there's a lot of digital noise. Hey, I'm hugging a celebrity and I'm doing, or what have you, and keeps on going. But what interests us mainly is how do we translate and connect the digital dots to the tangible, right? So let me give you an example. So the difference is that if I were to run a farm of 3D printers, and I go out there with a AI product, we could potentially 3D print this product and make a launch which doesn't cost anything. So you don't have to make that physical sample. You just go there with a thing, whatever the thing is. But once you get a big hit on that, and let's say you have a million hits, look great, we all love it. Can you make it? No. We can make 100, or we can make 1,000, or we can, but that's kind of where it stops. So the difference is, and we have the scale. So we can go out there with the thing, and they go, let's make a million. We can make a million. So that's the difference. So we're creating this digital, tangible, uh, 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 let's say, workflows, and then we'll see what happens. So we're going to be doing some fun experiments towards the end of the year, and then we'll see where it goes. But we're very very open and curious about the space.
Nice. Looking forward to seeing what you do there. A couple of things on footwear. So you've also said that a lot of footwear innovation is just decor. It doesn't add anything else except for kind of like a change to the actual aesthetic of the shoe, and it kind of just adds more layers and complexity. What does meaningful design look like to you in a world where hype is cheap and simplicity is hard?
Um, well, let me give you a little bit of a longer answer on this. So the challenge I think with especially with these bigger brand companies, you have an innovation team, but majority of the time the innovation team is more focused on a look of a shoe, right? And or certain material innovation or whatever, but it's still primarily based on what does Vietnam and Asia and the Chinese have? What kind of machines and materials do they have? So they kind of innovate within the constraints of the machines and the materials and the uppers and fibers and whatever they have. So in order for the Western designers to change their processes, that's quite complex. But what I think what most of these companies miss is you have this creative power, but creativity is in everything. It's in fintech, it's in supply chains, it's in materials, it's in processes. But it's really difficult because the way that most of these companies are structured. You have an innovation team, and they come up with an innovation, and now they hand it to the sourcing. But the sourcing guy has the contact in Asia. So it's not like, hey, we made this design, now let's make it in New York. Well, no, mine contact design. So it's like these departments are they're just not talking to each other. We just I think it's a shame. So of course, smaller companies, different thing. You're more nimble and whatnot, but this is especially the bigger companies' challenges. So I have a lot of creative people, friends of mine, who are really frustrated. So they work with this big company, and they're like, I can't change anything. I can only change the blue color hue or the tone. I'm going to move to the next company, and then the same same problems. So then they keep on running around in circles.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to ask you, from the consumer stat standpoint, I think a lot of brands think that if consumers are spending X amount of money, they expect a more lavish product. How much do you agree with that? Can a consumer still be willing to part with X amount of money for a simpler shoe or a simpler uh, product, whatever it might be?
I talking about like if I make a basic shoe, but now I make it out of sustainable materials, that would be more expensive. And
Yes, exactly.
um, to be very blunt, no. So I think it's a short-lived scenario where, let's say, again, the challenge is the following. So what happened, let's say, in the sustainability trend, like, hey, we're going to make these sustainable materials, hype this, that, blah, blah, blah. But then at the end of the day, then of course the big guys will follow up. They also make a sustainable shoe. Let's say these guys have a what have you, 100% bio shoe and has a cost of X. And then these guys make, well, same, but different. We're 95%, but we're selling it for $50. Are you selling it for 500? The word sustainability becomes a gray blur with the consumers. So it's like it literally happens across all these different, I mean, verticals. I mean, I don't know. Let's take meat. I mean, the same thing. You got this whole vegan movement coming on, all these plant-based burgers and whatnot. They raise a lot of money. And here comes Unilever. They're like, well, we just use the same kind of recipe, and we also make a vegan patty and a vegan burger. And it's like, yeah, same. Yours is $5, ours is $1, and they go, we just obliterate you. Like, and there you go.
Yeah. Okay. I also wanted to ask you, we've talked about food, we've talked about the footwear side, and you've also talked about the fact that, at the end of the day, your priority is just kind of taking your model and seeing where it applies. So are there any other verticals that you've got in mind that you think that your technology could be applied to? Yeah, I guess like what's next for you?
Well, it's again, it's more. Let me put it in this way: it's really a process that can take any liquid, paste, or gel kind of material. It's like if it flows, we can process it. Whether it's a soap or candle or natural rubber or polyurethane or ice cream or chocolate gummies. It doesn't really matter. But for us, it's more about connecting the dots with new partners. So we can make let's say I'm going to make a custom soap product for every hotel on the planet. They can have their own custom, soap. Great, fine. But we don't have the expertise on selling soap to a hotel chain, right? So it's more like, okay, if the CEO of Marriott or Hyatt or whoever walks in the door and listen, we're going to make this. Great. Now we want to find those launching customers who understands the sales channels very well. So we don't want to. We did the big gamble on ice cream to kind of first make those factories, build our channels. You can imagine this is millions. You're looking at really expensive ways of proving the point. And with footwear, really similar scenario. Of course, as an entrepreneur, you always dabble into these things and go like, well, how hard can it be? It's the famous last word of a bankrupt entrepreneur. How hard? It should be simple. So it's more like I open the dialogue towards people who are listening. Do you have a liquid based gel process? You have a good scalable channel for it, and you like the custom enough value proposition that we have. And also want to be clear about that we believe in the custom enough, but we can also make the scale and the mass and the one. But I just believe that there is this middle ground where we can make the mass product, but we don't want to replicate what is in the market today. We want to make those custom enough products that people are able to find the right channels for.
100%. I get that. I want to talk a little bit about investment too, and raising funds. We said a minute ago that currently you're building your a facility in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Some people might call you nuts for trying that. How do you convince these people that it isn't a moonshot and that it's a credible model that is going to work and that does work?
Yeah, and again, like give me an example of natural rubber. Um, so I started dabbling into this chemistry in my garden shed, and I bought this 1 liter bottle of, it cost me 20 euros to buy it and make, really basic mixtures myself. I learned something from YouTube, like became a YouTube chemist. And but from that experiment, I went to figure out the economics. Like, okay, I got this 20 liter, 20 euro per liter material, but I went to the Singapore commodities rubber index and see the price. I'm like, wait a minute. So the raw material costs are cheaper than the synthetic variants that the Chinese use for making shoes. What's going on here? This is just crazy. But again, it comes from again two things: sustainability and economics. So that's kind of the curiosity. And then I started peeling the onion more. I'm like, okay, so why is a natural rubber product so expensive in retail? You take the baby teether, you take the dog toy, you take the shoe sole, what have you. Why are they so expensive? And then you kind of peel the onion further, go, okay, so they dry the rubber, they process it, they compound it, they use this compression, high pressure metal molds and all that. I'm like, okay, so the production is so inefficient and expensive, and that's why the the cost is so high on these consumer products. So then again, peeling the onion. So the material cost is cheap. Here's the process, and here's the end product. The process is the problem. Let's fix the process, right? So that's a fundamental all. So then you start peeling the onion more. I go, okay, if we work with natural rubber as a liquid and not as a solid material, okay, then you're in an entirely different economical standpoint, and the process is entirely different. But the shoe industry is not going to go on and go to the kind of combining the packing industry and the liquid latex and then making shoes out of it. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense for the packing industry. It doesn't make sense for the guys tapping the rubber trees. So again, you have to come into in the middle from an entirely different hybrid perspective and connect the dots that for most don't make any sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I also wanted to ask you, no industry at the moment has avoided being steeped in kind of a legacy way of doing things. But is there any particular industry that you think is pushing the envelope the most and inspires you the most with what it's doing at the moment?
Well, in terms of manufacturing, not really. I mean, because we're kind of optimizing the industrial revolution technologies. So, let's say after the
Yeah.
Second World, the First World War and the Second World War, so those kinds of technologies that were created at that time, whether it's a ice cream machine or what have you, so it's still that same big metal industry. Of course, there's automation, but what's happening in all these technologies is that you're still basing the fundamental architecture of a product on that thing. So if I, again, I'm an outsider for the shoe industry, and when I went to the shoe factories the first time, I'm like, my initial thought is like, well, they're getting these robots to replicate the human hands. So you're literally making those how there's a last, and they pull the upper on a shoe and use a hammer and you glue the thing and countless parts and all that. I'm like, so they're replicating the human inefficiencies now with a robot. But from an industry perspective, of course, it's really efficient because the shoe comes out, we make it out, all these different steps, fine and well. But fundamentally, they're not really rethinking: do you even need a last? Do you even need this? No, they're just trying to make this existing process more and more and more and more efficient and effective. And of course, they're doing a great job. So especially the Asians, so like the labor also there is getting more costly, so these factories are more starting to look like fully autonomous car factories. But again, we're looking at it from a different perspective. We're not optimizing the existing way of making things. We're just creating an entirely new way of making things from scratch. Because we just don't want to compete. We want to create new markets.
I love that. Okay, well, look, that's everything that I had for you today. So thank you so, so much for your time. I think, as I mentioned before, at the very least, follow Jan on LinkedIn. I love your posts. There's always a lot of thought that goes into them, and they always really challenge you to think about things in a different way. If you're ever in Amsterdam, give him a call. He can show you around his facility. But even if you don't have plans to be there and you're intrigued to learn more about what you guys are doing, I think reach out to you on LinkedIn, give you a call. I know that you're always open and willing to tell people more about what it is that you're doing and how you're changing the way that we make. So thank you so, so much for your time. Cheers.
Ciao, ciao.